I knew the morning operational synchronization meeting was going to be an absolute disaster the moment I laid eyes on the catering spread. It was that incredibly depressing corporate assortment of dry pumpernickel and blueberry imitation bagels that looked like they had been sitting out on a counter since the previous fiscal quarter. They were paired with a massive tub of cream cheese that had definitely seen warmer and much more appetizing days. But the real tell was not the stale carbohydrates. It was the distinct smell permeating the room. It smelled heavily of palpable fear, mixed with a cheap cologne cocktail that I have unfortunately come to recognize and loathe over my 28 years in the information technology sector. We were abruptly herded into the primary executive conference room, famously dubbed the Visionary Suite, because apparently naming corporate rooms after their actual functional purpose is considered far too pedestrian for this modern financial technology disruptor. I stood quietly in the back corner, leaning comfortably against the server room door frame, which has always been my natural habitat. My name is Edward. I am 56 years old. I do not do corporate synergy. I do not do circlebacks. And I certainly do not do whatever the absolute nonsense was currently happening at the front of the room. I do hardware security. Specifically, I manage the dark, incredibly boring, and terrifyingly important intersection where this private financial firm touches the federal government infrastructure and money. Enter Julian Vance, the brand new Vice President of Technology. Julian is exactly what happens when a professional networking profile somehow gains sentience and immediately purchases an overpriced fleece vest. He is 31 years old, possesses teeth that are white enough to temporarily blind a commercial airline pilot, and speaks exclusively in motivational seminar subtitles. He had been working here for precisely 21 days. In that short amount of time, he had managed to use the phrase paradigm shift 55 times. I actually kept a tally on a notepad. Worse, he had yet to successfully log into a single administrative security console correctly without locking himself out and demanding an immediate password reset from the Tier 1 help desk. Julian tapped the microphone aggressively, sending a piercing screech of audio feedback echoing through the large room that made half of the senior engineering team wince in visible physical pain. Team, family, rock stars, Julian started, flashing a wide smile that absolutely did not reach his dead, shark-like eyes. We are officially entering a brand new era today, an era of unprecedented agility, an era of cloud-first, lean-forward, disruptive innovation that will shatter expectations. I casually checked my analog watch. It was exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. He had exactly 9 minutes before I absolutely had to run the daily encryption cryptographic cycle on the primary node. To get there, Julian continued, his voice dropping to that faux somber tone that executives always use when they are about to completely ruin the lives of their dedicated employees. We critically need to trim the excess fat from this organization. We need to shed the heavy legacy weight that is anchoring us to the archaic past and preventing our exponential growth. The massive room went completely silent. You could clearly hear the low, steady hum of the heating and ventilation system and the distinct panic sound of a junior database developer hyperventilating near the water cooler. "Edward," Julian said loudly. He did not look down at a piece of paper or a tablet. He just looked right across the room directly at me, actually pointing a finger gun. Actual finger guns were being deployed in a massive corporate layoff meeting. "You are an absolute legend here. Really, truly a legend. But your current role, it is entirely redundant. We are moving absolutely everything to a fully automated cloud infrastructure managed by a highly rated external vendor. The on-premise hardware you cling to is dinosaur technology. Today is officially your last day at this company." The breathable air immediately left the room. Dozens of people turned their heads to look at me in stunned silence. I clearly saw deep pity in the eyes of the older system administrators, the veteran ones who knew exactly that the so-called dinosaur technology was actually a highly classified hardened, localized server array mandated directly by the Department of Defense. I did not blink a single time. I did not cry or show any emotion. I just felt a very strange, cold, and calculating clarity wash entirely over me. It was the exact same familiar feeling I get when I suddenly see a critical red error line appear in a dense server log file. a significant problem that desperately needs isolating and immediate containment. Is that actually so? I asked, keeping my voice completely flat and devoid of any measurable emotion. It absolutely is, Julian smirked, clearly enjoying the intoxicating power trip of firing a senior staff member in front of an audience. Human Resources already has your severance packet ready. Corporate security will formally escort you out of the building right now. Oh, and Edward, please leave the secure company laptop right there on the mahogany table. It is standard asset retention policy. Now, here is the exact part where most normal people would scream at the top of their lungs. They would aggressively shout about their 28 years of loyal service to the industry. They would scream about the countless weekends spent desperately patching zero-day exploits. They would yell about the family holidays they missed, just keeping the fragile network from completely imploding during peak trading hours. I almost did that, but then I looked down at the specific laptop currently resting in my right hand. It was not a standard-issue corporate machine. It was a heavy, matte black, reinforced unit equipped with specialized biometric scanners that strictly required both a fingerprint and a retinal match just to boot the operating system. It was one of only 5 active audit nodes in current existence within the entire region. Julian, I said calmly, taking a slow step forward toward the front of the room, are you absolutely sure about confiscating this specific piece of hardware? This is not a standard employee workstation by any stretch of the imagination. It is strict company property, Edward. He snapped quickly, his arrogant smile slightly fading into visible annoyance at my insubordination. Just leave it right there. We will completely wipe the hard drive and repurpose the machine for the new summer interns. Repurpose it for the interns. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of that statement almost made me laugh out loud right in his face. He legitimately wanted to give a classified machine containing active cryptographic keys to a 20-year-old college student named Tyler so he could make social media videos on his lunch break. I slowly walked up to the large table. The entire room was watching the old guard seemingly surrender to the new blood. I placed the heavy laptop gently onto the polished mahogany surface. Okay, I said softly. It is all yours now, Julian. I turned around to leave the room. Hey! Hold up a second, he called out loudly. I stopped in my tracks, hand over badge 2 as well. I slowly unclipped my secondary access badge, the one with the highly specialized holographic magnetic stripe that strictly allowed entry into the sensitive compartmented information facility located deep in the sub-basement. And I tossed it casually next to the laptop. Good luck with the seamless cloud transition, I said, walking steadily toward the exit doors. We make our own luck in this industry. Julian replied confidently, already turning his back to me to address the terrified remaining survivors of his corporate purge. I walked calmly out of the conference room, proceeding down the long, carpeted hallway lined with those absurd inspirational posters that said things like grit and hustle, and stepped into the waiting elevator. My hands were absolutely not shaking. My heart was not racing in my chest. I was completely locked into full diagnostic mode. Because here is the critical thing that Julian Vance did not know. That specific laptop is not just a standard computer. It is a literal piece of federal infrastructure currently on loan to the firm. It is strictly tracked, it is constantly monitored, and most importantly, it has a prominent warning sticker firmly affixed to the bottom chassis that he clearly did not bother to read before seizing it. As the metal elevator doors slid shut, effectively cutting off the view of the office network I had diligently built from the ground up. Over many years, I reached deep into my left pocket. My fingers gently brushed against a small, completely innocuous-looking secure digital drive. It was absolutely not stolen proprietary data. I am not a criminal. It was my personal, highly encrypted backup authentication key, something I am legally mandated to keep securely on my person at all times per the strict terms of my federal clearance. Without me, and without that physical key, the secure audit node resting on that table was not just an expensive electronic brick. It was a highly sensitive digital time bomb, and Julian had just eagerly decided to sit right on top of it. I walked out into the massive corporate parking lot. The sun was shining brightly, the birds were singing cheerfully in the trees, and I had a very strong feeling that the Department of Defense was going to be extremely interested in Julian's aggressive asset retention policy. I sat comfortably in my car, a practical, paid-off luxury sedan because I am a responsible adult, and I simply stared at the large glass building. I could clearly see Julian through the transparent walls of the executive conference room. He was gesturing wildly with his hands, probably enthusiastically explaining how much capital he had just saved the company by terminating my high salary. "You absolute fool," I whispered quietly to myself in the empty car. I started the engine. I did not drive straight home immediately. I drove carefully to a small, quiet diner located 3 towns over. I ordered a large black coffee and a generous slice of cherry pie, and I sat in that booth for 2 full hours just breathing slowly. I critically needed to let the system timestamp solidify. The federal investigators would need the automated server logs to show a clear, undeniable gap between my formal termination time and whatever incredibly stupid thing Julian was inevitably about to do next. The dangerous game had officially started, and he did not even realize he was currently playing it against the federal government. My private home office is an absolute sanctuary of pristine cable management. There is absolutely no dust anywhere. There are absolutely no tangled wires. There is an impressive array of monitors that hums with the low, steady frequency of a beautifully optimized machine. It is the exact antithesis of the chaotic open-plan corporate nightmare I had just permanently departed. I sat down heavily in my ergonomic chair, my one true expensive indulgence, and exhaled deeply. The initial rush of adrenaline from the morning encounter was finally fading away, being quickly replaced by the dull, throbbing ache of deep insult. Redundant, that specific word kept aggressively bouncing around the inside of my skull. I had personally designed and built that entire secure network. I successfully patched its vulnerabilities when foreign state actors continuously poked at our firewalls over 5 years ago. I rigorously secured it when sophisticated cryptocurrency miners actively tried to hijack our primary processing servers 3 years ago. And now I was officially declared redundant because a young man who routinely wears expensive loafers with no socks had simply decided so. I opened my personal, highly secure workstation. Let me be perfectly clear right now. I did not illegally hack back into the company network. I absolutely did not need to do that. I am the designated federal custodian of the secure bridge. My official status as a primary contact tip point for the defense agency does not just magically disappear the moment Julian arrogantly confiscates my corporate badge. Until the complex termination paperwork fully clears through the bureaucratic channels in the capital city, which typically takes several weeks, I am still officially the registered keeper of the encryption keys. I carefully logged into the external government compliance portal. It is a drab, minimalist gray website that looks exactly like it was poorly designed 3 decades ago, but it genuinely possesses more complex security layers than the Pentagon itself. It requires multi-factor authentication, a physical hardware token insertion, and a complex passphrase that consists of 45 characters of pure, randomly generated gibberish. Access was immediately granted by the system. I systematically navigated to the Secure Asset Status dashboard page. There they were on the screen, the 5 deployed audit nodes. Node 1 showed offline, resting safely in the primary server room. Node 2 showed offline, locked safely in the underground backup vault. Node 3 showed active. My stomach immediately dropped. Node 3 was the exact laptop I had purposefully left on the conference room table. It absolutely should not be active right now. It is programmed to immediately enter a deep sleep hibernation mode, the exact moment my unique biometrics are removed from the immediate physical vicinity for more than 15 minutes. Unless he stupidly forced a hard reboot of the system, I muttered quietly to the empty room. I intensely watched the system logs populate on the screen in real time. The precise timestamps were glowing in bright amber text against the dark black background. 11:42 in the morning, hard reset forcibly initiated by user. 11:45, basic input-output system challenge failed. 11:46, basic input-output system challenge failed again. 11:50, administrative override attempted by user. Julian Vance administrator account. He was actually trying to aggressively brute force a federally encrypted compliance machine using his standard corporate administrative network credentials. It was exactly like trying to pry open a massive titanium bank vault using a flimsy plastic library card. "Julian, you absolute monumental idiot," I whispered in utter disbelief. I took a slow sip of cold water, my eyes completely glued to the bright monitor. Every single failed login attempt was being meticulously logged, not just locally on the physical machine, but also mirrored permanently on the secure server at the federal agency. He was essentially flagging himself with every single incorrect password guess. He was frantically waving a giant digital red flag that screamed, "Hello, I am completely unauthorized and I am illegally touching highly sensitive, restricted material." Then the scrolling log abruptly changed color from amber to bright red. 12:05 in the afternoon. Severe perimeter breach alert. External intrusion detected on port 8080. He was not just persistently trying to log in anymore. He had incredibly plugged the classified machine directly into the open, unsecured corporate internet. I tightly closed my eyes and forcefully pinched the bridge of my nose in sheer frustration. The secure audit nodes are strictly air-gapped devices. They are never, under any circumstances, supposed to touch the public web. They are designed to connect only via a secure, heavily encrypted tunnel by physically plugging a dedicated cable directly into a secure port. Or even worse, he was connecting it to the incredibly vulnerable Office wireless network. Julian had just foolishly exposed a highly classified endpoint to the wild, open internet. This was not just a simple firing offense anymore. This was a severe federal agents, in tactical gear, showing up at your front door offense. I genuinely had a choice in that exact moment. I could easily pick up my phone and call him. I could call the main office line, demand to get him on the phone, and aggressively scream at him to physically unplug the machine immediately before the automated federal sweepers detected the massive vulnerability. I could theoretically save his entire career. I could save the company from the absolutely massive, crippling financial fine they were undeniably about to incur. I slowly reached my hand out for my cellular phone. I dialed the main office reception line. "Thank you for calling Aegis Financial Systems," the automated voice chirped. I immediately hung up the phone. "Redundant," I said aloud to the quiet room. "I am supposedly redundant. If I was redundant, then my expert warnings were redundant too." Instead of calling, I deliberately opened a new encrypted email window. I carefully typed in the secure address of my designated handler at the federal agency. Let us call him Agent Hayes. Hayes is a stern man who possesses absolutely no sense of humor and possesses even less patience for sheer corporate incompetence. Subject line: urgent notice of status change and severe potential asset compromise. Agent Hayes. Effective 0900 hours this morning, my formal employment with Aegis Financial Systems was abruptly terminated without cause. I was strictly ordered to surrender physical custody of Secure Audit Node 3, serial number 8892 Alpha, directly to Mr. Julian Vance, Vice President of Technology. This occurred despite my explicit verbal warning regarding strict chain of custody protocols. I am currently observing highly erratic and dangerous activity on the asset beacon from my remote location. I am no longer physically on premises and cannot intervene safely. Please advise immediately. Regards, Edward. I firmly hit the send button. The true beauty of the massive federal system is the sheer weight of its bureaucracy. I had officially done my legal duty. I had formally reported the employment separation. I had accurately reported the compromised asset location. Whatever terrible things happened next were entirely 100% on Julian. I quickly refreshed the detailed log page. 12:15 in the afternoon. Secure directory structure accessed via unauthorized guest protocol. He had actually managed to bypass the initial login screen using a well-known guest account exploit. It is an old, simple trick that works on outdated consumer operating systems, but it automatically triggers a sophisticated honeypot trap mode on these highly secure machines. The machine brilliantly lets you think you are successfully in the system. It shows you fake folders. It lets you click on useless things, but it is silently recording every single keystroke, every erratic mouse movement, and it is completely sandboxing you in a secure digital cage while it actively traces your physical location. Julian genuinely thought he had cracked the encryption. I could practically see him enthusiastically high-fiving the other corporate executives in the conference room. "Look at this," he would say proudly. "Edward tried to lock it down, but I easily got in because I am a tech genius." He was currently browsing the fake honeypot files. He was rapidly opening decoy folders clearly labeled Confidential Budget and Highly Restricted Project Alpha. These specific folders were completely empty decoys, essentially digital flypaper. But then I clearly saw the metadata tag for a new file he had aggressively uploaded to the secure machine. The file name was Aegis Pitch Deck, Final Version 2. Presentation. The file size was 45 megabytes. He was not just looking around the machine out of curiosity. He was actively using the classified federal laptop to casually store his own corporate presentation. He was treating a government audit node exactly like a cheap, disposable universal serial bus memory stick. I leaned back deeply in my chair. The absolute silence of the house felt incredibly heavy, highly charged with invisible static electricity. "You did not just accidentally touch the hot stove, Julian," I said quietly, intensely watching the cursor blink on the screen. "You just willingly climbed entirely inside the blazing oven." To truly understand exactly why Julian is currently dancing recklessly on a massive legal landmine, you have to clearly understand exactly how I got hired in the first place. 10 years ago, this specific company landed an absolutely massive, highly lucrative contract to aggressively process sensitive transaction data for a critical sub-agency of the federal government. It was the kind of massive revenue that buys executive second homes in luxury ski resorts. But with that massive money came a very strict clause. The legal clause firmly stated that the company had to maintain a localized, heavily hardened physical infrastructure strictly for data validation. No cloud computing, no external servers, no shared drives, just cold, hard, isolated steel locked in a secure room managed exclusively by a custodian possessing a very specific high level of federal security clearance. That custodian is me. I was not hired because of my sparkling personality or my ability to make pretty pivot tables in spreadsheet software. I was hired strictly because I hold a highly restricted federal clearance with a rigorous polygraph requirement. I am the literal human requirement for their massive billion-dollar revenue stream. For the first 8 years, the old chief technology officer, a very sensible man named Richard, completely understood this strict dynamic. Richard was genuinely great. He constantly wore comfortable cargo shorts and looked exactly like he slept underneath a server rack, but he deeply respected the hardware rules. He knew that when I said no to a request, it was absolutely not a suggestion. It was a binding law of physics. "Edward is the impenetrable wall," Richard used to say. "We do not ever drill holes in the wall." Then Richard happily retired to raise livestock on a farm, and the corporate board decided they desperately wanted fresh, disruptive energy. Enter Julian Vance. I clearly remember his very first week on the job. He boldly walked into my private office, which was actually just a converted storage closet located right next to the noisy server room because I strictly needed to be close to the physical metal. He immediately wrinkled his nose in disgust. "Little dark and depressing in here, is it not?" he asked, casually leaning against the doorframe, loudly sipping an organic green juice that probably cost more than my hourly consulting rate. "Keeps the ambient heat down," I said flatly, not looking up from my diagnostic monitors. "Right. Listen, Edward. I am looking closely at the organizational chart, and I am seeing a tremendous amount of hardware dependency in your specific sector. We urgently need to virtualize all of this. Move it entirely to the data lake." "The data lake?" I asked, finally turning my heavy chair to face him. "The cloud, Edward. We desperately need to be agile and lean." "You absolutely cannot virtualize the audit nodes," I said simply and firmly. "They are strictly air-gapped by federal mandate. Clause 4, Section B of the Binding Master Contract." He dramatically rolled his eyes at me. "Everything can be virtualized, Edward. You just need to have the modern vision for it. You legacy information technology types are so emotionally attached to your blinking metal boxes. It is cute. Really, it is like collecting vintage vinyl records. Cute." That was the precise moment. That was the exact defining second I decided that if this arrogant man ever slipped and fell off a steep cliff, I would absolutely not be the one throwing him a rescue rope. He foolishly saw me as a relic, a middle-aged man in a faded cardigan, who simply plugged things in and turned them off and on again. He completely failed to see the staggering complexity of the advanced encryption I managed daily. He did not see the relentless daily cyber attacks I successfully deflected. He did not see that I was the absolute only reason his private emails did not get read by hostile foreign agents in non-extradition countries. He essentially saw a highly paid digital janitor. Over the next few brutal months, he aggressively chipped away at my small department. He fired my incredibly bright junior administrator, a dedicated young man named Noah, simply because Noah outright refused to illegally install unauthorized employee monitoring software on the secure network segment. He ruthlessly cut our operational budget for critical spare parts. He even started casually calling the secure server room the Dinosaur Museum. I took it all quietly. I kept my head down. I meticulously documented every single denied request, every minor policy violation, and every passive-aggressive email he sent. I intimately knew guys exactly like Julian. They constantly float upward on a fragile bubble of hot air until they inevitably hit an altitude where the oxygen completely runs out. But I honestly never thought he would be incredibly stupid enough to actually fire the designated federal compliance officer. Back in the present moment, I stared intensely at the blinking cursor on my home screen. The deceptive honeypot on the stolen laptop was highly active. Julian was currently exploring a massive dummy folder I had carefully created a year ago called Project Phantom. It contained absolutely nothing of actual value, just gigabytes of randomized noise data that looked exactly like highly encrypted military code. But to a clueless guy exactly like Julian, it looked like the ultimate holy grail of technology. I suddenly remembered a brief conversation from 2 weeks ago. Julian had been loudly a fresh blank text document. I titled it Chronology of Severe Federal Compromise. I started typing rapidly. Date, October 14th. Event, unauthorized physical seizure of restricted federal asset. Primary actor, Julian Vance. I was not writing a casual personal diary. I was drafting a formal legal affidavit because when the massive dust finally settled, there would undeniably be a massive federal inquiry, and I fully intended to be the one holding the proverbial pen, not the one wearing the tight steel handcuffs. There is a common saying in my highly specialized line of work. You can easily delete the file, but you can absolutely never delete the shadow. Metadata is the shadow. It is the undeniable story about the data. It explicitly tells you who created it, exactly when they touched it, what specific machine they were using, and exactly how long they stared at it. Julian firmly believes that just because he possesses the physical laptop, he has complete control. He utterly fails to understand that the laptop is merely a dumb terminal. The massive federal brain is constantly watching his every move. I spent the entire afternoon meticulously compiling the detailed dossier. It was highly tedious work, but deeply satisfying, much like popping bubble wrap. Evidence Item A, the undeniable log of him connecting the secure laptop to the unsecured corporate wireless network. Evidence Item B, the precise timestamp of him foolishly disabling the local antivirus software, which unbeknownst to him only hid the small notification icon, not the actual active protection. Evidence Item C, the damning screenshot of him attempting to copy the fake honeypot files to a personal thumb drive. That last particular action was incredibly damning. The system had immediately flagged the inserted drive as an unrecognized generic mass storage device. He was actively trying to exfiltrate restricted data off a secure machine onto a highly insecure portable stick. That is a massive Tier 1 violation. That is lose your security clearance forever and go to prison territory. But the absolute cherry on top of the disaster sundae was the integrated webcam logs. The secure audit nodes are equipped with hidden security cameras that automatically snap a high-resolution photo. Every single time there is a failed login attempt or a severe security flag is triggered. Julian had carelessly generated about 40 massive flags in just 3 short hours. I quickly opened the encrypted image cache. There he was in high definition. The images were slightly grainy, black and white, illuminated harshly by the bright glow of the screen. In one photo, he was frowning in deep frustration. In another, he was laughing arrogantly, pointing confidently at the screen, while a blurry figure, probably a sycophantic junior manager, looked on in awe. In the third photo, he was actually eating a messy burrito directly over the keyboard. Crumbs falling into the secure keyboard mechanism, I noted meticulously, typing it directly into the formal report. Violation of strict physical hygiene protocols for secure hardware. Petty? Maybe. Highly accurate? Yes, absolutely. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my secure phone buzzed loudly. It was an unknown restricted number. Area code 703, Northern Virginia. I picked it up on the very first ring. Edward, a deep voice stated flatly. It was incredibly dry, raspy, and sounded exactly like it belonged to a hardened man who smoked cheap cigars while reading heavily redacted documents. Agent Hayes. Agent Hayes, I replied respectfully. Did you receive my urgent email? We certainly did. We are currently seeing some highly unusual and concerning telemetry coming from Node 3. Is the physical device currently in your secure possession? Negative. As clearly stated in my written email, my employment was abruptly terminated this morning. The physical device was forcibly confiscated by Julian Vance, Vice President of Technology, directly against my express legal advisement. There was a very long, heavy pause on the encrypted line. He actually confiscated an active federal node? Hayes asked, his deep voice dropping an entire octave in utter disbelief. Does he possess the physical encryption key? No, I replied. He is currently running an unauthorized guest session, but he has physically plugged it into the commercial web, and he is actively loading proprietary corporate files onto the secure drive. I distinctly heard the rapid sound of a heavy keyboard clacking on Hayes' end of the line. Fast, rhythmic typing. We are seeing a positive data packet match, Hayes finally said. He is aggressively uploading a massive presentation file. The file header contains specific keywords indicating defense contract integration. He is officially pitching to Global Defense Dynamics tomorrow afternoon, I said clearly. He desperately wants to use the classified laptop as a cheap theatrical prop. He is going to demo a live, highly classified node to a completely unauthorized third-party vendor,